Well, here we are. We have Millennial Touch presents Community Conversations on Technology. I'm your host, Konnor, the owner and operator of Millennial Touch, for tech support and digital marketing needs, servicing Nassau County and beyond, which is part of the goal of having a podcast. Today is my first guest and undoubtedly my most special guest forever, Ron Kurtz. Ron Kurtz is a Fernandina theater legend, a well-known historian, a lover of the arts, a lover of the written and spoken word, and a dear, dear friend of mine. So, Ron, thank you so much for being here in this flagship installment of what I hope to be a really fun um, series of conversations with the emphasis on the intersection of all things technology and all things community. Well, two things I love, one thing you love, community, maybe not so much technology.
Yes, you've hit my focus. I am amazed by the technology. I'm intrigued by it, but I don't celebrate it in the same way that you do with knowledge. I just press buttons and pray.
Well, Ron, what is amazing, I think, about this, not only this being the first installment, but us getting to also just continue a conversation that we have had ongoing for years now, which is that I recognize that people don't all have such a positive relationship with technology, and I won't even say that I've always had a perfect relationship with it. But I found it my calling to learn and to embrace it and to get where I am now, which is have this business. But in a way, especially with what we're talking about today, you have been pivotal to my journey because together, of course, we worked on the Storycast series for Story and Song, Bookstore and Bistro here in Fernandina Beach, where we did literary readings and recordings with some sparkling commentary and the occasional conversation. That was hosted by you, and the words were given life by you. And so when I think audio, your voice is just what plays in my head.
Well, that's good to hear. You know, essentially, one of the reasons I've been as tolerant of technology is because you've been kind of guiding my footsteps through this. But I do respect something essential about technology, which is the ability to communicate. And of course, my skills were honed decades ago and are of a slightly different nature, but they translate to technology all but seamlessly. And one of the things that was very interesting, I've almost become a voice actor, and I no longer have that moment of terror when you look at a screen and you're in front of a machine and all of a sudden it's recording and you hope your mouth is going to work, but you're not quite sure. Um, but essentially, seeing how these two supposedly opposite schemes can come together in a tapestry and do what we're all intent on doing, which is communicating, sharing ideas, and making this most confusing life of ours into a relevant celebration.
Well, Ron, not for the first time. I could not have put that better myself. Um,
You don't have to. You've
well,
got
there you
me.
go. See, that's a match made in heaven. I really want to touch on something that you just said, which was about skills. You know, we have said, and I think this is just universally known, but I never want us to stop having this kind of conversation. That at the height of COVID, we started trying to understand how we could through necessity diversify the kind of things we were offering. And when I say we, I mean every not only, we talked about story and song, but every business that I supported, every business or organization I was a part of, our first question was, well, what do we do? We can't be together. Some organizations that I knew were just starting, and so this was putting a real cramp on what they could do. We couldn't gather physically in one space, so the arts suffered as well. So we tried to see how we could take what we had access to, which in some cases was relatively limited, a Zoom account, a couple microphones, things like that, some social media pages. But what I think was amazing was the way that we brought skills together. So, for example, I wouldn't say I even had some of the skills that I would then learn and try to focus on. But you brought, as we were saying, you brought your stage presence and your experience, and it's no small thing to transition to a voice-based, audio-based, to become a voice actor like that. And they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but
Woof.
I,
Woof.
I would have to challenge that one, especially after. Not that I'm calling you old or a dog.
However, if the shoe fits, wear it. I do, with pride.
But
kinky boots.
I was gonna say if the ruby slipper fits in this case. So, and I think about too how so we're sort of, every time we say post-COVID, something horrible happens. So I'm just gonna say, now that we are at this point and we are in the future, some people are trying. I don't want to say trying to roll back, but are saying, well, some of this was based on necessity, and we can get back to the foundation of what we're about.
There's something very interesting in that perception. And you used a term that I don't particularly like, which is future. I firmly believe in the present, and the present really only. Not the past, that's over, can't fix it. Future, I don't know what's there. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know present. And one of the things about the entertainment field, our local theater company has done something interesting. We could have just closed the doors, which most theater companies actually did for a year and a half to 2 years. We did not. Through some very creative management, and might I add, which is one of the reasons I'm a little more open to some of these changes, with technology, we ended up continuing offering very relevant professional shows to the community. But when we couldn't have audiences come in because we didn't know the masking situation, we didn't know masking for performers, we had to just reinvent this wheel. We took out some seats. Oh, but isn't theater about audiences? Don't you need them? Yeah. Well, there was a different audience out there that technology essentially opened the door and made it possible. Brought in 3 cameras, took out some seats, had camera positions so that and this was terrific magic to me, live streamed the shows. And I just didn't know what kind of voodoo magic this was going to entail. And I literally, I graduated from New York University. And there were some filming skills that I had learned, but I just had not tapped into. I directed the first show that we did, full tilt, from start to finish with the live streaming. I had to block not only for a very, very small masked live audience, and I do mean very small, like sometimes there were 20 people in the house, and that was considered a full house. We live streamed to like New Zealand, as a matter of fact, which shocked me. Friends in Taos saw the show, which absolutely flummoxed me. But I had to direct it from the standpoint not of a proscenium, which is the 4th wall and that frame around a stage, but also from camera angles. And it was an incredible crash course in relearning the fine art of communication through theater and through entertainment. But it was something incredible to see and hear and experience. My actors loved it. As a director, I adored it. Um, and again, with the pandemic coming into the forefront, obviously, if there weren't live venues, I literally was going off the deep end because I had no way of communicating. I had a voice. Nobody wanted my body on stage. So what do I do? How do I share? Um, it just happened with the conversation with Mark and Donna at Story and Song that we came up with the idea of, well, why not short readings of just a wide variety of things? Why don't we do that? And we did, and it has been a 2 year but continuing journey. Some of them were the first 2 years, really. We had it through the computer and podcasts. And then after that, we've just done live readings. But then again, the world opened up again. So, media, entertainment, all of this is just responding to the reality of the here and now, dealing with the present and discernment.
No, that was wow. That was perfect, Ron. You know what's? It's funny that we ever even wondered what we would say. But and Ron, you just touched on so many great things and so many of the key elements of why I wanted to have this conversation, because your work with the Amelia Community Theater and helping them adjust to this, this modern, but again, we talked about necessity with the time, with the pandemic, of reaching people, and I also, for my part, I began to understand during all this that there was a spectrum there. So the ACT was putting on fabulous professional grade, very, very high quality, but luckily they had the resources. You guys had the resource to do that. I also had the opportunity to work with people who were varied, who didn't all have the resources or even the time frame to, or the manpower to organize something like that, and so we worked with what we had. But it was amazing to see how much could be done with a lot or a little, and what kind of great things, and how many businesses. And this was sort of the thing I was saying toward the end of my last section, is that how many people have realized, like, oh, actually we really like doing this. You know, for example, I mean, it was my job, but even I could not have understood the way that when we could not be together, social media based marketing, which was where we talk about, our audio series with Story and Song, where it mainly lived, was through social media platforms and YouTube and things like that. But it's amazing how much people were looking for that extra connectivity. We received a lot of feedback that when things were at their darkest, or during COVID, not that this whole thing will just be about COVID, it's just it's more recent, unfortunately, than it could be. But people said, this is like, I'm at home, but I've got my friends all around me. I remember while we were doing camera, before we switched to audio, people say, well, sometimes I just close my eyes and just listen, and it's like Ron's right there reading to me. And the one thing about those series, and we've said this, and luckily, and as we went on, you had guests and things, and those conversations were incredible. I mean, you had former Fernando Beach Mayor Arlene Filkoff
Yes.
join, renowned architectural designer Don Yannick. Again, amazing how many of these people just live in Fernandina, just live around the corner, and they're like, "Oh, can you come?" And
When you open the door with conversation, and one of the other things I do in my spare time, which since I've retired, I haven't had any.
I was gonna say, I don't know. I don't. This is the first I'm hearing about spare time.
Oh, well, it's
Ron, if I knew you had all this spare time, I would have.
I kid,
would have put you to
I
work
kid
more.
myself. I want to think that I've got spare time and I want to think that I'm retired, but I really do plan on going with my boots on. I lecture in Northeast Florida history for Rhodes Scholar program, and I do a lecture which is followed by a tour of the island, which includes the island history and architecture, and we have such a rich story to tell. It's incredible. But one of the things that always intrigues me, my opening of the lecture, I do an Eight Flags lecture that is an overview of our European control of the island and our eventual finding our feet in the United States of America as well. Um, I have had, I've never had, and I do about 40 of these a year, a single time when I've introduced myself and talked to the people, never had an audience where I didn't have somebody who lived in a place where I lived. This blew me away, who was very familiar with the theater that I cut my teeth in, the Fulton Opera House in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or actually that we shared very deep friendships with people in common and we didn't even know it. But that kind of connectivity in the world, which if I weren't standing in real time in front of a group of people in real time, I wouldn't have been aware. But frankly, even when real time doesn't exist, um, I don't know what made me think of this.
The
Just to
connectivity is still there, I
well, it
guess.
is. And what's fascinating is we had a poetry canteen at Story and Song. A fella and his wife came in and said, "Oops, we're not poets. We don't belong here. I write short stories." Well, as you know, I tend to be a little aggressive. I grabbed onto him and wouldn't let him out. And I said, "No, no, 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 read your story. That's okay. We're all about the sharing of verbal arts here." So he read a story that tickled me no end and actually ended up, um, I asked him to just leave some of those stories at the front counter with Mark. I need to read more of these. And maybe Konnor and I will do a show on that. Well, the maybe we'll do a show ended up to, oh my God, of course we're going to do a show. And I was working on a bit of my cracker talk, cracker accent, and it was about Toby, junkyard dog. Oh, that dog was bad. And we just skyrocketed in our viewers. And I even included in a Christmas program, if you can believe this, Toby and the Christmas pageant. So one thing leads to another.
And what's so funny is that, and I love when this happens, and this has happened with you and I, Ron, so many times, is when, because I have been as much your audience member as I am, producing, because I get swept up in your reading and dialogue. So sometimes I have to check back in and be like, oh, hold on, let me monitor, like, are we still live? Are we? But sometimes I'll be trying to guess, like where you're going with a lead up. And in this case, for example, I was like, "Where is he? Poetry Canteen?" And then you said, "And this couple," and I was like, "It's the Toby stories." And I'm glad that you mentioned this too. And the Toby sort of series, like the which we did all separate, not in a
Mm-hmm.
row, but different installments, were some of, if not our most successful recordings. So, and that was also featuring one of your classic accents. I made a mental note while you were saying that one of these days we're going to do just the greatest accents of Ron, like all these
I
different.
don't have
Oh my
any
god.
accents. I mean, for heaven's sakes, Konnor, I don't know what you're thinking about.
That should we should have just done this entire conversation in that accent, and at the very end you're like signing off just with your
Oh,
normal voice.
and here's the real me. Actually, the real me does not exist.
I was gonna say, is there? I don't even know if I've seen that
No,
version,
you've never seen it.
but
It's my secret.
well, but what's amazing too, and see, I feel like this is all so interconnected. We've talked about applying skills in ways that we didn't always foresee. By bringing in the strength of your voice work, you're able to, people are focused on the voice, and you obviously have you're a great orator, you're a great speaker, and a lively reader. But when you throw your ability with accents in, and I have no skill with accents. I have my sibling; they're really, really good with accents, but you can take any piece of literature, and if it is in part, which I think many are, defined so much by who we envision the narrator to be, or at least how we think they should
Hmm.
sound, you just create. It's entertaining, it's fun, but I think also that we engage more with it. If you're reading a Zora Neale Hurston, or
One of my favorites.
absolutely, or any number of British, or C.S. Lewis,
Mhm.
a British author, or one of my all time faves, and Mark's favorite, which was the Anti-Mame, which was not British, just like
That
more
was my cultured voice.
cultured, non-American cultured
Now that
voice.
is an act. That's not
Yeah,
me.
well, I could have, yeah. But that's the thing, though. You talk about how this is, or has been for the last few years, your stage, as it were, and you've brought all of your strengths to it, just in a different way. And so I obviously have been just blown away by that, by you more and more that we've worked together. But also, it's amazing that people are so intimidated by the idea of trying something new. I never realized how intimidated people were until I started doing other things. So, alongside, and even before we were doing like a more thematically focused audio series, I was helping people do lives and conversations, and we had an Instagram live series that we were doing, and people were, and I think of myself as a decent, public speaker, and I usually can fill silence with words, and I don't mind the sound of my own voice. But it's a striking to how much people are not comfortable with that. And I had many, and we featured business owners, artists, all kinds of people in the community who are doing different things and covering all sorts of themes and focuses. And so many people after the fact were like, "Thank you for forcing me to get out of my comfort zone and get in there." And as you said, sometimes during a pandemic, you might be featuring, you might be doing an event, like if we're at Story and Song, with a new author who doesn't know anyone and doesn't have any, and they're kind of nervous. And so we might have a small audience, but we can also capture that conversation or that voice, and then that also gets out there. And so we build this network, we build, and this goes back to what you were saying too about your friends being able to see your performances at ACT. You build this network, and we joke, and obviously there are plenty of downsides of social media. There's no arguing that. It's my job, and I still have moments where I wish it just didn't exist. But we have the key there is network, right? And we build and these senses of community that exist. We here in Amelia Island really value community. We have a rich history, we have a rich makeup of who we are, and we're from all over. But we have our community that extends beyond our physical borders, and these anything virtual can then reach people, wherever. I mean, I think of the times that you forwarded me emails from people asking how they could get a hold, friends of yours from all over the world asking how they could get a hold of our recordings. And I was always sending out links and making sure people
Because
could
I
access
just
them.
didn't have the light bulb to figure out how to do it.
I'd be out of the job if you did.
Well, that's
So
true.
I'm always thankful. Every time someone says, "Oh, I just can't," I'm like, "No, please feel free."
That actually hits on probably the essential point of all of this. We are not alone in the world. We need people. We need a group that is our group. And the whole point of living from one day to the next, 1 year to the next, is solidifying the group we've got and expanding. And that's just an ongoing process without a definitive beginning, middle, or end, except when you pass from this world. But it's essential to take these all of these aspects and use it to build again the present, this magical place where everything is here and now, right now. And it's astoundingly powerful to realize that we're alive in the moment. And that's what, to me, the arts actually do for all of us. Because there are things, that you wouldn't say to a stranger you meet on the street. But if you've got a theatrical production and the playwright's done his job and the performers have and the directors have, you can open discussions about literally anything and everything. And affect positive changes in the way the world operates.
Well, Ron, I think that we absolutely agree on that. There's no question. And it is striking to see how the role that the arts, broad strokes, have on people, because you can really see it in our community, which has such an emphasis on the arts, visual, performance, literary. I mean, we are blessed to have a very vibrant artistic community here, but also a community that supports the arts and wants the arts, that appreciates it. So we're all very lucky in that.
And that really realizes essentially painting, dance, theater, music, whatever, instrumental, vocal, all of these are just different colors in the palette of communication, basically. And we are actually doing the same thing, but with different voices.
Absolutely. I I've always felt, that the arts are so much more alike than they are not alike. And as a person who is not excessively artistic or has any artistic ability, really, I have only ever had an enormous appreciation, but also I've also felt that the arts were of immeasurable value because the arts, I think, they in a community sense they bring us together, but I think the arts also make you think. For me personally, who I like to think that I think a lot, especially, thinking and tech are at least a little bit intertwined, but I think that without the arts and my experiences with the arts, I don't think that I would be nearly as much of as what I want to be, which is a well-rounded person. But I also think that there's inspiration there. One of my favorite taglines that I always say when I talk about, IT and all things tech, which has become such a big part of my life now, is that it's not really about technical know-how. It's really about problem solving, the essence of which is creativity. When I am helping, if I'm working in a support function or maintenance or troubleshooting something, I am not there and using what is like some sort of limitless technical knowledge. I don't have it. I think that I try to get outside the box. And I think, and I'm glad I can tell you this, Ron, because since you're not on social media, I can tell you this. You're the only one who hasn't had to hear this anecdote already. I was helping a woman who had an antique rotary phone. It wasn't a real rotary phone because I foresee someone hearing this and challenging me on this because that's what everyone was saying on Facebook. It looked like an antique rotary phone. I loved it regardless, but I was using it to test if these ports were working. So I had my ear to this antique phone and I'm plugging the cord into different ports, and it was so fun because it was what I was there to do, which I enjoy, but also it was about creativity. At the last minute, I was like, man, I was really stumped about this issue, and here I am with this antique phone, and this woman who owned the house is just behind me, looking at me like a crazy person, and little, there we had it. We had it all fixed. So I think that the arts, creativity are just immeasurably important.
One of the interesting things about that, to write, you really do need a handle on grammar, which is a whole bunch of rules and things you've got to learn and this sort of thing. To sing, you've got to be able to read music and know what those little dots on a lined piece of paper indicate so you can follow a path. In technology, you have to know what button to press so that the contraption turns on. You've heard me use this term continually. I had to get a cell phone, and I've only had one for 2 years, and I had some personal reasons for that. But I still call it, not always with love in my heart, my devil tool. Because it makes me it tells me what to do, and it won't let me play with it unless I do it its way. And I keep wanting to remind it, I'm the boss. Well, maybe I will be the boss someday when I learn what those buttons are, but with my bifocals, that's highly doubtful. Because I'm always pressing a fat finger over two things, and it picks which of those two things it's going to do, and then I go ballistic.
Well,
and oftentimes call Konnor and say, "What the heck do I do?"
I will tell you that I never use the word smart tech because tech is not smart. And if it is smart, it's only as smart as we are, or sometimes worse. So
That's terrifying.
you are not in the minority of having those phone issues. And again, what is so funny about all of this, our whole just so much of what we're saying is that I found my way to technology because of the need for creative input. I found myself, you know, being just a little knowledgeable here and there, and fixing some things for some people and helping people. I also have a background in teaching, and really being wanting to connect with
Yeah.
people, to help people, and to think creatively. And so I think for me, that's my artistic, and that's my creative endeavors, as it were, helping creatively, helping people. By contrast, I was trying to do design work earlier before Ron got here, and it was a complete disaster. So that is my contribution to this world of the arts, is my technical creativity. And so, well, thank you, Ron, so much for, and I will absolutely say this on air anytime. As always, you are my guinea pig, my partner in crime and otherwise, depending on the setting. And I so appreciate you taking time to join me here and for this flagship episode, this new venture that I'm going on and we're going on
Yep.
together. And we will look forward to more guests, more conversations, more half-baked themes, and just more people talking, more connectivity.
Go where inspiration leads you.
Very strong ending, Ron. Thank you so much.